I've just gotten back from seeing Rise of the Beast at the cinema, and wow, I don't even know what to say. Honestly, I thought it was really good, but not in the ways I expected it to be. The movie definitely did a lot of new and surprising things that I loved with the Autobots, humans, and story that we never really got to see before in the Michael Bay movies. And although a lot of it paid off and we got some really fantastic moments and fights, there were a few things that held the movie back in my opinion from being even better, including the end. We didn't get an end credit scene, but we did get a glimpse at what's to come in the next movie, which pretty much came out of nowhere. I've got mixed feelings about it, but I'll get into that later. So, what's the movie about? Full spoilers ahead. Transformers Rise of the Beast doesn't pull any punches as it throws us far into the future, on the Maximals' homeworld, now under attack from the gigantic Chaos Bringer Unicron. And no, he's not inside the Earth in this movie, like he was in The Last Night. He's in his Planet Alt mode, as Rise of the Beast and by proxy the Bumblebee movie are a complete reboot of the franchise, which has been confirmed by the movie's director Stephen Caple Jr. Personally, I'm all for it and think it's something that needs to happen sooner or later. The Michael Bay movies, despite being controversial, still had some really great ideas that could never be properly showcased without it contradicting what came before. That problem would be 10 times larger if Rise of the Beast was a prequel, since there's so much stuff that doesn't connect up with the other movies. That doesn't mean, however, this movie doesn't have plot holes of its own, especially with the villains, which I'll talk about later. Back to the story. The Maximals are way more advanced technologically than their Decepticon and Autobot ancestors, as they've discovered transwarp technology, which allows anyone to freely travel through time and space, all of which is controlled through a single key. A key Unicron wants so he can continue to feast on the other planets outside of his galaxy and time, and rule supreme throughout space. So instead of destroying the Maximal planet outright, he sends his dark energy empowered minion Scourge and his fellow Terracons to retrieve it for him. Now, Scourge's design and introduction was perfect, with how he emerged from the tree line starting as this ominous glow and then revealing his towering battle-worn chassis. And the voice was purely sinister. He ultimately faces off against and brutally destroys the Maximal leader, who's not Optimus Primal but Ape-Link, tearing off the gorilla's insignia and adding it to his massive collection that tattooed his arms, that have symbols from so many different Transformer factions. At this point, Scourge was building up to become one of my favourite TF villains from this intro alone, but as we'll see later, that didn't really happen, and for good reason. However, amidst the chaos, the remaining Maximals are able to escape to ancient Earth. This whole sequence was so enjoyable to watch, and it set the plot for the movie going forward. However, despite how amazing this intro is, I wouldn't say it's at the same level as Bumblebee's Cybertron scene, but also what I wasn't expecting was that what came next to be one of the highlights of the movie. Meet Anthony Ramos' character Noah. He's ex-military and lives at home with his mum and younger brother who has sickle cell disease. And I was not expecting his character to be this good and well developed. Like every other person at some point in life, Noah just wants to find a job, but in Rise of the Beast he desperately wants one so he can pay off and continue to pay for his brother's healthcare bills, which are just swamping him. What's even crueler, however, is that at every twist and turn he's unable to or is unfairly dismissed regardless of what he does, leading him to desperate measures and almost breaking his moral code when he goes to steal a car. Which is a pretty relatable scenario to be in, especially when you're trying to do your best to look after someone you deeply care for. And this moral breaking point becomes extremely important and explored more later in the film. By the time he realizes what he's doing, however, the car he broke into takes him for a little joyride and then into an abandoned warehouse. Turns out the car was Autobot Mirage, a character who I really thought I wouldn't like as he just seemed like the typical young rebellious type we've seen countless times before, but somehow he turned out to be my favourite Autobot in the film. And the synergy and banter between him and Noah was a big standout in the movie for me. I'd even say it was better than B and Charlie's dynamic, and it makes me wonder if we could have had chemistry like this if Bumblebee was able to speak from the beginning. Moving on, the massive change and character arc that I didn't see coming was with the big guy himself, Optimus Prime. And right away, you already know he's very different and not the Optimus that we're used to, when compared to when we last saw him in Bumblebee and even to how he was characterized in the Bay movies. Instead of being the open, strategic Autobot leader that we're used to, in Rise of the Beast he's become quite stubborn and lacks his caring and trusting nature towards Noah and Elena, even to the point where the awful consequences of what could happen to Earth are just an afterthought to him. At first, it was honestly quite jarring to see, as it seemed quite out of character for him to be so cold towards the others, and more like how he may act if he was still Orion Pax. However, as the movie went on, it began to make sense. We saw in the Bumblebee movie how traumatic and devastating the Autobots' escape from Cybertron was. Plus, Earth was never meant to be a forever home. Optimus only wanted it to be a place for them to regroup and then retake Cybertron. Yet, this never comes to be. The Autobots are forced to completely isolate themselves from one another and go into hiding, becoming stuck on an alien world for 7 years, a depressing fate that Optimus blamed himself for, and has become determined to right, no matter the cost. It's actually quite a good premise and starting point for his character in the movie, drawing some parallels to when Prime and Age of Extinction had lost faith in most of humanity as he and the bots were hunted down. But most importantly, it mirrors the motivations and mindset of Noah as well. It was nice seeing the similarities between the two. What made it more interesting was how it made them not see eye to eye. One wants to make sure Earth doesn't get destroyed, while the other wants to make sure there's a way to return home, to the point where Noah is almost about to double-cross the bots and destroy the key entirely. I don't think we've seen a main character actively go behind Optimus and the crew's backs before, and honestly not even for the wrong reasons. It was an interesting plot point. Remember that transwarp key from earlier? Well, it's also the Autobots' ticket home to Cybertron, and now that it's resurfaced in a museum on Earth, the bots and Noah embark to take it. They finally bump into our second main human character, an upcoming archaeologist, Elena, whose curiosity of the unknown led her to accidentally activate the key. Like Noah, I also thought Elena was a pretty good character throughout the movie, but I do think she could have gotten a little more screen time. The Terracons arrive, a fight breaks out between them and the Autobots, then we get that scene from the trailer where Scourge overpowers Prime and kills Bumblebee. Well, not kill, more like power down. The death itself didn't catch me off guard, but I didn't think it would be in the film's first 30 minutes. It was clear that B wasn't one of Rise of the Beast's main cast, so they probably wanted him off screen so they could focus on developing everyone else instead. I mean, it kind of worked. Side note, I couldn't take it seriously after Prime said it cannot be. Either way, Scourge claims the key, but before he can fight Prime again, he's stopped by Airazor. Retreating victorious, he presents the key to a dying Unicron, only to then be tortured for being tricked. As back with the bots and Airazor, we find out Scourge only took half of the original key, with the other half being hidden somewhere in Peru. With the torture over, Unicron then reveals that the Terracon leader used to be a regular Transformer, who fell into the Planet Eater's service when his homeworld was consumed by the Dark God. And whilst this piece of trivia is fascinating with how Scourge appears to have been unwillingly bound to Unicron and had his whole world destroyed, open up the possibility of exploring what effect that's had on him, is never picked back up again. It's one of the things I felt the movie missed out on, and definitely could have spent the time developing and fleshing out. That's without even mentioning the backstory behind the amount of worlds he must have ravaged to claim so many insignias. Plus, there's a big plot hole. If he's from the future and the transwarp key is the only way to travel through time, then how did Scourge manage to travel back to Earth? The same goes for the other Terracons as well, who we get even less from, despite having some of the coolest live action designs. Alas, I digress. Transformers Rise of the Beast then takes us over to Peru, where the Autobots eventually run into the Maximals during their search for the key. The Maximals look absolutely amazing, and I love how they portrayed Optimus Prime as this wise, pacifist, and nature-oriented leader. Very reminiscent of his Beast era self, and of course reminiscent of Optimus Prime, the great warrior he said he named himself after while said warrior was standing right in front of him, who he also gave a lesson to about trust and being open to humanity, as he introduces him to the group of humans who have protected the Maximals' secret for centuries. I think the movie really nailed Primal, especially with how reluctant and saddened he was when he had to fight and kill a corrupted Airazor. But on the other hand, the other Maximals minus Airazor don't really get to say or do much at all, which was a bit sad to see, given how much personality and character we know they had in the Beast Wars cartoon. The movie is literally called Rise of the Beasts. They're supposed to be, a big deal. Also, they didn't really explain why Airazor was separated and unaware of where the other Maximals were. Feel free to comment and correct me, but it also sounded like Airazor was also with a completely different group of Maximals when she landed on Earth, but somehow they all mysteriously died. Were the humans supposed to be the culprit, or were the Predacons behind it? I don't know, they definitely should have made it a lot clearer. The one part of the movie though that I have no complaints about whatsoever was the final battle. That was really well done. Mirage sacrificed himself for Noah, Noah fighting alongside Optimus, getting that Iron Man-like suit, and B's return were all stunning to see. I'd say out of all the movies, this one probably had the most satisfying final fight and tension. What was confusing, however, was the ending. Out of all the things in the Transformers universe, the Decepticons, Predacons, Unicron returning, even the Quintessons and Cybertron in the Empire, Rise of the Beast chose to tease and set up Noah joining G.I. Joe for the movie trilogy going forward. I can't lie, it was the last thing I was expecting, but only because I don't know that much about G.I. Joe to begin with. I was honestly waiting for it to show Megatron and the Decepticons finding Earth instead. For those of you who don't know what G.I. Joe is, it's another military sci-fi style franchise owned by Hasbro that has crossed over with Transformers a lot in the past, especially in the comics. In fact, back in 2021, they even released their own movie, Snake Eyes, which didn't do too well. I really hope that this ending isn't Paramount and Hasbro just trying to set up the next G.I. Joe movie, as I feel like they need to keep the focus for now on properly bringing back Transformers to the big screen. One of my main issues with the Michael Bay movies was that each film felt too disconnected from the last. There was no continuity or overarching story. It had all these amazing concepts and ideas, but no proper thread linking it all together. Now in Transformers Rise of the Beast, this is very different, which is good. We do get nods too, and it feels like a continuation of the Bumblebee movie. So if they do go down this G.I. Joe route, have it more tied into Transformers to begin with, and then go down the path of their own movies. What do you guys think? On the whole, Rise of the Beast was still pretty enjoyable to watch, and although not entirely perfect, it was good in that it explored new storylines and built on the human-transformer relationship. And I'm looking forward to what's next. We already know that the next movie releasing in 2024 is a prequel to this movie, and you can learn more about that by subscribing for the latest Transformers news, reviews and videos. Take care.